Hello and welcome back to the Avrum Rosensweig Show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm really, really happy to be here, in particular because I am so excited about my guest today, Rabbi Shlomo Gemara. We will get to that in 1 second and to him. The show is all about fascinating people who have inspiring stories to share with us. In the past, take a look at some of the interviews that I've done. You can find them on YouTube. You can find them on Facebook and other such social media outlets. A few weeks ago, I interviewed Hillel Holkin, who is world renowned, certainly Israeli renowned, translator and author, brilliant, brilliant fellow who has hobnobbed with all the great literary giants in the Jewish world. And if not, spent time with them because they're not here on our earth anymore. He has translated their stories. Last week, I interviewed Rabbi Korobkin from the Bayit Synagogue here in Toronto. Rabbi Korobkin, also a very erudite fellow, has translated a book or a sefer, a Jewish Torah book, called the Kuzari. And he's one of the only ones who has translated. And we had a discussion about this very quirky book, which was written by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in the 12th century. And it was basically a dialogue between a king and a Jewish scholar about the credence given to the Jewish faith and the importance of it, and was written around a time when philosophy, Greek philosophy, was really making its way into all the corners of the world, and in particular the Jewish world. So that's why the Kuzari was written. Lots of great stories, lots of great interviews. And today we have another one with Rabbi Shlomo Gemara. Rabbi Shlomo Gemara is a Israeli-born rabbi and teacher. He was born in Petach Tikva, and early on he discovered a great passion for teaching. And he came here as a shaliach, which is an emissary for Israel, for the Jewish people, and went back to Israel, but decided he liked it a lot. So he came back. He became the Rosh Yeshiva of Or Chaim, which is a Mizrahi yeshiva. That's the head of a Talmudic school, and ultimately ended up at one of the world's biggest, if not the biggest, Jewish high schools called Chat here in Toronto. And there is the vice principal. He is an Agnon specialist. We'll explain what that means to you shortly. And he's a friend of mine, and he's a lovely guy. Welcome, Rabbi Gemara.
Thank you very much, Avrum. I'm very humbled that you invited me because I see the caliber of the people who were already on the show, and I feel a little bit unfit.
Well, that's why I invited you, because you're so humble. And yet, I don't know, in my mind and in the minds of many people, you are just a fine, fine human being and a Torah scholar. And also, you're a very quirky man. I like your quirkiness.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Rabbi, your name is Gemara. What is that? What is that? Was that on your father's birth certificate?
Absolutely. And you know what? This is a mystery. It's first of all, I find it like a great topic to discuss because people say, Gemara, is it real? Is it true? And it's very true. My father had this name. My grandfather, who I knew from my father's side, bear his name. And you know, the funny thing, when I came in 93 to Toronto, a person in Clarendon Park Shul came to me and said, "You are the grandson of Shlomo Gemara?" I said, "Well, I don't think so." He said, "Because I knew from Poland a whole family of Gemara. Are you a Kohen?" He asked me, and I said, "Yes." He said, "You should know, I knew this area in Poland. It's called Sherbin. And I actually knew a person by the name Shlomo Gemara. I was completely like, I never heard about it. And my name Shlomo comes from my mother's name, my mother's side, which is interesting by itself. Because, you know, I want to open and ask you a question, Avrum. What is your greatest decision about your life that you ever made? I just wonder, like, if you can say about something that was the greatest decision that influenced your life.
Having a child for me, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what is the greatest decision for me. And it actually was not made by me. It was made 15 years before I was born. My grandparents, they lived in Brussels in Belgium. And unfortunately, they were taken in the second last a transport from Bristol to Auschwitz. At the night before they were supposed to go to the train, my grandfather made a horrible decision. He decided to leave my mother with a Christian family, and by this he saved her, and that's why I came to the world. For 40 years, there is no one day that I don't think about the courage of making such a decision, because later we learned that in this transport there were many children. What parent will leave his child behind? And they did not know exactly what is awaiting for them. So I'm very proud to bear his name, Shlomo. His name was Shlomo Mayevsky. And I don't cease, even for one day, as I say that, to think about the fact that he's the reason why I'm here. And his decision was the most important decision for my life that I had nothing to do with. It was like, this way or this way, and I'm pretty sure that they were torn by making this decision. I don't want to think like how the discussion between my grandfather and grandmother looked like the night before they were transported to Auschwitz.
Do you feel that's a mystical thing? That decision made, do you feel that it was something which was godly in nature?
Absolutely yes.
How does that play
Absolutely
out?
yes,
How does that play
because
out?
you know what? I don't think that everyone at the time could rationalize it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that many people would critique it, criticize it. I simply don't know. I think it's kind of inspiration of a moment. And, at the same time, as I said, in this transport, many children were taken and turned to ashes, like my grandparents.
Have you ever you asked me the questions, one of the biggest decisions of my life. What was the biggest decision of your life?
So, as I said, the biggest decision was not made by me. What was made by my grandfather 15 years before I was born in 44. Then decisions, I would say for sure to come to Canada,
Yeah.
that influenced my life in a big way. And as you said, I came as a shaliach, and I went back actually to Israel and came back after 2 years. And yes, for sure, this is like my life is shaped by this decision. No questions about it.
Rabbi, since I've known you, and I've known you for a number of years, you knew my mother of blessed memory, my family. When I think of Israel, who personifies Israel, I think of you. Really, you're erudite in an Israeli sort of way. You're very culturally Israeli. You're imbued and ensconced in Torah and Jewish life. Why did you stay here?
That's a great question.
Yes.
And I feel like I'm in a therapy, which is good, by the way.
That's what I do.
know to
That's
do
what
it
I
very,
do. Yeah.
very well, Avrum.
Yeah. Thank you.
I would say that I had to be in Canada, and I'll explain what I mean. Because in a very young age, I started to be open to many, many opinions, many people who are different than me, and I appreciated it. I appreciated people that I don't agree with, but they have something to say. They did something magnificent. I went to the army. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit later. And I started to see that the world is much more than the people I met until I was 18 years old. And I was reading like from a very young age, I must say that. And the books, as Agnon say, instead of flying all over the world comes to you.
Yes.
And it's a great feeling. Like I read a lot, and I really wanted to experience what is the world, the biggest adventure of my life. And I always wanted to experience something different. And when Rabbi Felix, who was here at Rosh Yeshiva, called me in Israel and said, I want you to go to Toronto, I think I was ready for this. I went to my wife and I said, I think it's a great opportunity. Send by Hashem, I would like to try it. And that's how we found ourselves here.
What was it like? Do you remember what it was like adjusting to the culture? Because, the Israelis call us, I believe the word is adin or adishim, like very soft. Culturally, we're dramatically different than Israel. And a proof of that, as my sister was talking to me yesterday about a Canadian who is a chayal, who is a soldier in Israel right now, and he's having a very, very difficult time, obviously fighting, as the Israelis are, but he even more so. And that's because he was born in Canada. In Canada, we're not threatened by external forces very much at all. Our challenges are usually from within. So, what was it like for you to acclimatize?
Um, Beyond all expectations, I was welcomed by a very warm community. We felt at home almost at the first moment. The community that I belong to, the community of Orchaim, was amazing to us as a family. The people were extremely nice. I'm sorry to admit, but we had no difficulties to immerse into the Canadian culture
Okay.
very, very easily and very nicely. And at the beginning, you are so excited, you forget what is
Yes.
the toll you pay for it, which is like a little disconnect from your family, from your friend. This usually come after a few years. You start to realize that as you enjoy life here and you are happy about what you are doing, you lose something very significant in your life. The tie that I formed before, family, friends, and things are happening in life. And when you make a decision to be in a different place, that means that you are going to lose upon many connections and ties that you had before.
Rabbi, here in Canada or in Toronto, we apologize a lot. We're consistently saying I'm sorry, not only to human beings, but if you bump into a chair, I've seen people apologize to the chair. Israelis don't do that. What would you say were one of the character traits that you have that you had to adjust in order to make yourself a good Canadian?
Um, exactly as you said, to say sorry for everything and to be nice, and sometimes to round the corners if it's parents or students or others. It took us some time. Sometimes the Israeli within me sprang out, I must say, until this very moment. But you learn to be a little bit softer. And by the way, it's not that I was that rough before, but certainly I had to learn a few things.
So recently you went back to Israel to see your mother who wasn't well. Thank God. Am I correct?
Right?
Right.
Yeah, Malka, yeah.
Okay, very good. When you go back, you also have three siblings. When you go back to Israel, do they or did they comment on, "Oh, Shlomo, you seem so different now," or were you pretty much intact?
No, I never heard these comments, to be honest. Again, I did not change much from within. It's more like the certain
Externals,
behavioral
yeah.
codes that you have to adopt. You cannot be dugri, as we say it in Hebrew, like straightforward to your face. Um, but again, I don't think that before I was that like, wow, in your face, I don't care what you think. I was a little bit softer, but I became even more softer.
Rabbi, as I said, you were born in Israel in Petah Tikva. In 1973, the war broke out. You were in grade 9 at that time. And you were asked if you could act as a teacher because many of the teachers were in the army, were fighting the war, and we find that today similarly. You said that you thought it'd be a lot of fun, so you decided to do it. And indeed, once you had done it, you said it was absolutely wonderful. Do you remember those days?
I
What was so
absolutely
wonderful? What was so wonderful about teaching?
I'll start a little bit before. I
Yeah.
had a very happy childhood. I must say that I grew up in Tel Aviv
Yes.
until I was in grade 1, and then I came to Petah Tikva, which was then a young city for people who could not, I guess, afford a house or apartment in Tel Aviv. So this became the suburbs of Tel Aviv. I had wonderful friends around me, and I had a great school, Netzach Israel, that today I know was the first elementary Dati school in Israel ever. I never knew it as a student, but this school had history. And I was a good student. And when we went to grade 9, I learned in Yeshivat Nechalim. This is a yeshiva high school, not far away from Petach Tikva. And, you know, I can tell you just about the day. We stayed in the yeshiva on Yom Kippur, how the war broke out unexpectedly, obviously. And we went home. And I had a principal that wanted all the students to come after the break of Sukkot of 73 to come back to the yeshiva. And we came to the yeshiva. And let me tell you, we had no teachers, number one. So the one teacher took us to the Beit Midrash to learn for a Seder, and we tried to learn something in the afternoon. But I remember this time mostly playing basketball in the court. And then my previous principal, Dr. Levy, called me and he said, "We need teachers. We need teachers." I said, "Are you kidding me? I'm in grade 9. Like, what do you want me to teach?"
14
said,
years old.
Yeah, just come. We will arrange it. And you know what? I thought it will be nice for my experience. And you know how many days you can play basketball from day to night. So I thought it will be like a nice change. And I went to teach. And they gave me grade 5. And I asked him, what they teach? Whatever, just keep them in the class. And
I could see Israelis saying it like that.
Like curriculum. The word curriculum I learned only when I came to Canada. You ask about like different, like teach them whatever you want. Okay, so I started, I think, with teaching Torah and Rashi. I decided on Parshat Shavua to take like beautiful pieces of Rashi. Let me tell you, it didn't work well. And then, because I was a reader, I took a book which, based on all kinds of stories from the Talmud, from the Midrash, beautiful stories. And you know what? It was like a miracle. The class was silent. I remember that in the first day, the principal went by, he looked into the class, understood what's going on, but for him, it was quite an achievement that the students were there and not all over.
Yeah.
The second day, when he came, I remember he stood next to the door and like was staying for 10 minutes. And I was thinking like, what is going wrong?
What am I doing wrong? Yeah.
Yeah. And then he came to me, he said, the previous teacher was never able to have 10 minutes like this. I said, apparently he didn't tell them stories. And by the way, I learned quite a lot from this experience. We all love stories. Messages of stories are going straight to your mind and to your heart.
Yes.
And when you try to teach something different, if you don't turn it to a story, it will be much harder to teach.
You know, Rabbi, my friend Eli Rubenstein, who's also been a co-host on this show with me, he and I have known each other since our yeshiva days many, many years ago. He told me, he said, when he first began as a spiritual leader at Congregation Habonim, he would get up there and he would, in an erudite way, present halacha, present Jewish law, and you know, some of the intricacies of Talmud and so on. He said he would look out and he see everybody nodding off. So what he decided to do instead was to start telling stories. And to this day, that's what he does. He has 2,000 stories in his head. Another thing that you were quoted as saying is that, especially as vice principal at Chat and as a teacher there, that humor is a very big deal in your teaching, right?
I don't plan it, but I take things with humor. I think the whole approach of humor means, first of all, you don't think yourself as such an important guy that cannot laugh with your student, number one. It doesn't take anything from your ego or presence, maybe the opposite. And number two, listen, there is a natural barrier between a student and a teacher.
Yes.
They don't see your personal side. They know that you are knowledgeable. They know that you impart some knowledge and understanding to them. but they don't see you as a human being.
Yeah.
And humor had a wonderful way to bridge this gap. Like, wow, this guy can be funny. This guy can laugh at himself or at other people. So of course, as long as the borders are clear and we don't chas v'shalom, like affecting any other person or his dignity or honor, humor has a great impact on students and teachers.
Does a joke come to mind?
That's a too difficult one. But I'll tell you one thing, not jokes. I got few presents from my students over the years,
Yeah.
and eh, interestingly enough, it happened to me. I was a teacher in Kibbutz Yavne about 35 years ago, and I was a teacher here in Chat. And in 4 occasions, 2 in Israel and two here, at the end of the year, my students gave me a notebook with all the jokes and the things that they thought were funny and handed it to me. And to me, this is the most wonderful gift I ever got from my students. And apparently it had some influence on them. I always tell them, please, remember the Rashi and the Tosfot. Don't remember the joke. But you
Yes.
know what? Unfortunately, it's like a sermon. The rabbi can talk wonderfully. What people takes is the one joke. So I'm sorry that I did not prepare any joke, but you get the idea.
It's an interesting thing about jokes. When you're called upon to give a joke, it's very difficult to sort of draw them out of your brain. Excuse me, out of your brain, right? I get that.
Right.
Rabbi, I want to go from the funny and the light to something a
And,
bit
and
more.
again, I just want to say one thing. A good joke is a joke that is unprepared. It just come out of the situation, and it's like a line, it's a punch.
Spontaneous. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I don't prepare jokes when I come to the class.
Okay, very
One
good.
one listen, one joke that I told them, and they were really
Yeah.
laughing. My beard used to be much longer.
Yeah.
So when I came to class, I knew that the students will ask what happened. So I told them that when I went to Yorkdale, it was like about a month ago. Uh, I got sick from all the kids who asked me, what am I going to bring them for Christmas? So, so I cut a little bit my beard. It's not the real
Yes.
story, by the way, but
I could see you being Santa Claus at Christmas time.
yeah.
I've actually done that, by the way. My friend Marty and I, we were called upon to come down to a shelter for kids, and we were asked to be Santa Claus. So I said, okay, why not? And it was fun. I was a good Santa Claus. So,
Listen, can I share with you one story?
Yeah, please.
It
I'd love
happened
you
to
to.
me in the winter of '94, I believe. I went to the mall on Lawrence and the Allen Road. Remember this mall?
Yeah,
I don't know
sure.
if it's still active. I wasn't there for a long time. Anyway, they had a huge Christmas tree, and I went by, and the Santa Claus next to the Christmas tree who take pictures, he like sees me and said, "Lichtige Chanukah." And I said, "What? What do you mean, Lichtige Chanukah?
I
It's
love
like
that.
you are a Jew." So he said, "I'm a Russian Jew. I need money." He said, "If they would pay well, I will be Jesus Christ."
We truly are a light into the nation, aren't we?
So if you talk about like cultural shocks, this
Yeah.
was one of them.
Rabbi, years ago, the Pope came to the Dufferin Park, not far from where we are.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of people there. So, being the good Jew that I am, I wanted to go hear the Pope. I thought he's so close, I have to go hear him. Fascinating individual, although, certainly his history is not entirely in sync with we as Jews. That being said, so I went. Anyways,
This is the Polish Pope.
the Polish
right?
Pope,
Or-
right?
yeah.
The Polish. So the Pope is about to speak, and everybody gets quiet. You're in an environment, thousands of people. You could hear a pin drop, except one guy is walking around. He's going, Pope buttons. I got Pope ribbons here. Come, you can buy a Pope fudgicle. I call him over. I go, maybe you should have a little respect for the Pope. He's about to speak. And I'm sure you're being Catholic and all. He goes, oh no, I'm not Catholic. He goes, I'm Jewish. I said, oh, okay, go do your business. Rabbi, I want to get a little bit maudlin here, a little bit serious. As I said, you were in Israel a short while ago to see your dear mother. God bless her. She should be well. You have siblings in Israel, and as an Israeli and as a Jew and as a committed, strong Jew, I want to ask you, October 7th happened. I want to ask you what your response was to that in your mind and your brain to your students. And also the second question is, we'll pile them on here, is you were in the army. You were at Sanhan, a paratrooper. Can you give us a little bit of insight into what's going on in the minds of our 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old Israeli brothers and sisters who are right now smack in the middle of Gaza, fighting a war that is very bloody, that is very dangerous? So those two questions.
Okay, I will start from October the 7th. Actually, I happen to be in Israel on Simchat Torah. And my grandchildren, I was hosted nicely, of course, by my son, Netanel, in Yerushalayim. He lives, by the way, one house. He lives on Aza 35 or 37, I'm sorry, and Bibi on 35. So in the middle of everything, and my grandchildren knock on the door at 7:45. Azaka, there is a siren, and what, mazaka, Tseva Adom. Okay, so we were 15 people in the apartment, and we ran into the mamad, this protected room that supposed to survive even a missile attack. And it really hit me strongly. I remember when my son, another son, Eliashiv, he was 4 years old, and we all went to the Madadi, this protecting room in Israel, and it was a very scary experience then. And here, he's not 4 years old, but he is a father to a 1-year-old son. And we again are in the same situation. This time, it's the second time when I was a father, now I'm a grandfather. He was like a baby, now he's a father to a baby. And we all 15 people stuck in a room, not knowing exactly what happened. This was one take that I had, a very strong one. And then, knowing nothing, it was Simchat Torah. We did not know anything that is happening. I wanted to go to the shul, which is not far away, and the streets of Jerusalem are empty. And this brought me back to the memories of Yom Kippur War. You could not see a person outside. And I thought, I'm not that old. Twice in my life to have this experience, and now the third time, I felt so bad about the situation, not only for myself but for the Jewish people in Israel. How many times we have to go through this? And then I thought about my parents. My parents both are Holocaust survivors, and they are not young, and they have to see it again. The constant fear for the life of Jews around, especially in Eretz Israel, that was supposed to give us the protection. Now, I was a soldier in the Lebanon War, the first Lebanon War. It was very different. It was, at least for me, you are trained as a soldier. You really want actually to execute your skills and your knowledge as a soldier. And when you are 18, you don't really think too much about the consequences, the possible consequences. We learned it. Unfortunately, I lost in the first Lebanon War more than 10 of my close friends. These are people that I did the Tironu, the basic training, and then went through the army. But when you go to the war, I remember the sense of excitement. And then, like at the end of the week, when we, between Thursday night to Friday morning, lost so many of our friends, close friends. Um, and I have to tell you one thing, which I find quite amazing. I'm in education for many years, and the general feeling among educators is that הדורות הולכים ויורדים, like the generations are going down. What I see, what I hear about the young soldier, about the young people in Israel, shock me in the most positive way. These guys are real heroes. Like, I'm embarrassed when I hear and see their determination, their attitude, their pride. And I do believe, from the little I know, and from what I hear from relatives and children of friends that are in the army, it's not only the sons anymore, it's even the grandsons of my friends who are in the army. There is a strong feeling among, again, my circles, that Israel has to win, and the cost is justified for the future of the Jewish people. Again, unfortunately, we saw many of our friends' children killed in the war. But nevertheless, the courage, the bravery of the parents, of the families, just shock us. We honestly cannot understand it from here. And we have to be very proud about the people there, the soldiers, and the community here. What I see here, how Jews from all denominations are connected, they care, they donate, they ask questions. You know how many people called me to ask if my family is fine?
Yes.
And I find it so heartwarming and so Jewish. People that know me very little, that call me to make sure that I'm okay, my family is okay. I find it fantastic. And students in the school, many, many times, they ask me, they know that my family is in Israel. They come to me, Rabbi Gemara, how's your family doing? Everyone is fine. Can we help in any way? And honestly, it touched my heart.
Rabbi, when you went back into the classroom after your return and you're sitting there in front of the students and the class is about to start, and in your soul, in your heart, and in your mind, you're in Israel, no question about it. What proceeded to happen within the classroom? What did you say? What did they say? What was the
So
feeling?
first of all, I'm still teaching Talmud, although I'm a vice principal, and most of the day I'm busy with administrative stuff. I'm I insisted to continue to teach. I need to feel the pulse of the students. I strongly believe that when you are in education, you have to feel what the students feel and to
Yes.
be part of them and to understand their life better. And first of all, every class, I try to start with what happened in Israel. Let's talk a little bit about what happened in Israel. It's a great opportunity for me also to teach them few modern words in Hebrew, like what is mechablim and what is minharot and hafchatzot and all kind of things that
Can you
normally,
translate?
Baruch Hashem, they don't have to talk about. But if you read like an Israeli newspaper, I want them to be familiar with many of the words that are used there.
Rabbi, mechablim are terrorists.
Yeah,
What were the
mechablim are
other words?
terrorists, minarot are the tunnels.
Yes.
Um, we sometimes talk about all the abbreviation of amlach, emtsai lechima, which is like weapons and ammunition, and so on. So, but talking about Israel, and they see that I care, and I don't try to hide it. And I know that they have difficulty because if you don't have a relative, you don't understand, like the fear of knocking on the door or something like this. Um, so on one hand, obviously, I don't want to scare them, but I want to bring this world and these feelings of Kol Yisrael Arevim. We are all together in this into the classroom, and I think I find it very meaningful, and I think they find it very meaningful.
Can you remember any of the interaction that you had with your students here?
They ask many questions.
Like
They
what?
want to know more. That's the most important thing. They try to ask about, like, um, you know, the first day when I came back to class, I asked them, "Where is Gaza?" And you will be quite shocked to know that 85% of our students did not know where is Gaza, and they don't understand how things are working. So they will listen to the news, but they will not understand, like, the fact that Gaza is sandwiched between Egypt and Israel, and what are the difficulties, what is the disconnection between the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. So they want to know. Our students are smart, they want to understand more, and I try to provide them this education.
Rabbi, your daughter, whom I interviewed a while ago, probably a couple of years now during COVID, is a nurse in Israel. I'm sorry, her name escapes me. What was her name?
Rachel,
Yeah,
Rachel
Rachel,
Gemara. Yeah.
lovely, lovely human being. And she was written up all over the world because essentially she was the very first nurse, if you will, in Israel
Right.
to be with the first COVID victim, an 88-year-old man who was a survivor of the Holocaust. You must have a lot of pride in her and, of course, your other children. What is it like to be an Israeli living in Toronto, having your family back in Israel, and knowing what's going on during the war?
Uh, I want to commend my wife, first of all, because she is in touch with every one of my 8 children, Ken Irbu, every single day,
Yeah.
which is amazing to me, because I have to admit I couldn't do it.
You're a guy.
So,
You're a
so
guy.
just for our audiences, I have 4 children in Israel. I have 2 in United States and 2 here in Toronto.
Yes.
So my wife is great in it. She keeps touch every day with everyone and make sure that everyone is okay, and she knows what's going on with every one of them. I try to call once a week, maybe twice a week, uh, and I hear the news from my wife. Um, Listen, we are here. We, of course, think about them. There is no question, and a lot. And we want to know, like, how the grandchildren are doing, because sometimes they have no Beit Sefer or no gun. It influences every avenue of life in Israel, and we want to know what happened. At the same time, we are not there to really help, so we have to be, connected and disconnected at the same time. Like, we don't want to be the Eitzah giver, the person who give advice and not really can help physically with everything that is going on. So it's a fear. I have to tell you, every phone call early in the morning or later at night is like, no, let's not raise the phone, because we don't know what happened.
Yes.
It's in our mind, we are more afraid of bad news rather than good news, and this is it's a state of mind that is very damaging mentally.
Rabbi, you're in a school, you're an administrator in a school, vice principal chat where which has experienced a bomb threat. Our city, I think, our Jewish community is experiencing more anti-Semitism, or at least a greater feeling of anti-Semitism, than perhaps ever in our recent past. It's very clear that anti-Semitism is growing. It's much more felt by many Jews. If you would have asked Jews before October 7th, most of them in Toronto, tell me about your experiences with anti-Semitism. Most of them say, I don't have any, right? That's not the same today. Why are we hated so much, the Jewish people, Rabbi?
That's a mystery that I have no answer to it, to be honest with you. Like, sociology see anti-Semitism as a phenomenon that is hard to explain. Because if you see the history of anti-Semitism, it's actually contradicting. Sometimes the Jews are too poor, sometimes they are too rich, sometimes they are don't control anything and they are not involved, sometimes they involve too much. Before they had no land, now they have land, they even hate it even more. I don't think that there is any rationale going into it. I have what I want to believe, that it's a jealousy, in a big way. The fact that the Jewish community managed to survive 3,700 years. Listen, there is no society that managed to do something like this. And it was not that we lived in paradise. We lived under the harshest conditions. And unfortunately, instead of inspiring the world, and people will say, I want to be like these people. Listen, I remember my parents, they came with nothing. The most important thing for them was education. I'm sure that Toronto people have the same story. People came from Hungary, from Poland with no money. They wanted only one thing, education to the children, the family. So I always say, when I hear about anti-Semites, I say, you know what? You just have to experience one Shabbos. You have to experience one time going to shul and to feel what community is. You are not going to be anti-Semites. But unfortunately, it works mysteriously against us. And it's a big mystery to me. But I'll tell you one thing, because I want to focus on the positive side of anti-Semitism, which might be interesting thought. Avrum, I teach like rabbinics, and we teach our students about Jewish values.
Yes.
For many of them, they may be happy to learn about it, but nothing happened afterwards. Maybe they will be older, they will care more. But to be honest, for many of them, Jewish values is not the center of the world. They see themselves more like modern Canadians, the people of the greater world. In the last few weeks, we have a little shul in chat. We have a beautiful Shachris Minyan, boys and girls, and we have Mincha. And people leave their tefillin there. And we have lineups of people coming to wear tefillin every single day. And I ask them, what happened? It's nice to see you. And I don't want you to think that I don't want to see you. But tell me why now you come? They say, we feel October the 7th was a message to me as a Jew. They don't attack us just because it's another country in the world. And I want to feel connected to it. And I hear it again and again. Yesterday, we had in Or Chaim a beautiful a lecture by a girl who is a officer in Tzahal, and she is serving with many chayalot, many female soldiers. And the Shabbat after October the 7th, they came to her, they asked her to light candles together. So again, not that I try to encourage anti-Semitism in any way, but we have to see how indeed we Jews take the most horrifying experiences and turn them around. Instead of like, oh, I'm afraid to be a Jew, I will try to hide my Jewishness. Some of the reaction is exactly the opposite. They made us more proud of who we are. And we have to recognize and to build on this foundation. I don't want my students to be Jews just because the attack of Hamas. But this is a fantastic opportunity to ask ourselves this question: why they hate us? What happened to the Jewish community, wherever you were, if it was in Russia or Poland or Yemen, we always were hated. Why? Let's try to understand what is unique about the Jewish community. And you know what? This is a great hook and a great question that every Jew has to ask himself. Why are we suffering?
Rabbi, you alluded to the idea that it's a mystery as to why anti-Semitism exists, and from my reading and from my understanding, indeed it is. But my question to you is, and also you mentioned, by the way, that if the non-Jew would join us for a Shabbat once, they would see what a beautiful people we are, and anti-Semitism would shrink. I think it's probably a bit more broad than that, but I happen to agree with you. So let me just build on that for a second. If they came to you and they go, Rabbi Shlomo Gemara, we want to put you in charge of turning anti-Semitism around, what would you do?
First of all, I think we have to learn the history of anti-Semitism. I think it's very, very important to understand that it exists. And before I will answer directly your question, one of my greatest concerns as an educator in Canada, and this was for many years before the October 7th, was that the survival instinct of the Jewish people in the modern world weakened to a point that it presents a danger for the continuity of the Jewish people. We have wonderful life here in Canada, in the United States, and modern countries in Europe. But the fact that we as a community did not have to be challenged by anti-Semitism, so people see themselves as part of the larger society. And if Chas v'Chalila, I screamed it like 10 years ago and 15 years ago, if Chas v'Chalila things will turn around, and Jewish history teaches us that overnight things can turn around, are you going to survive the storm? That's a big question. And I always feel the urgent of teaching students about who they are, because the storm for me can come from somewhere. As a son for Holocaust survivor, as someone who is really read a lot about our Jewish history, I cannot escape the feeling that it might happen. If not today, maybe tomorrow. If not tomorrow, maybe in 50 years, maybe in 200 years. But my responsibility as an educator is to make sure that 1,000 years down the road, there will be continuity. And first of all, it has to be a physical one. And I feel many, many times that some of our students, some of our children,
Yes.
If they tomorrow put on a remote island and have to develop like a Jewish community, they don't know how. And in a way, they are going to find themselves in a remote island. It might be in the middle of Manhattan, but it's still a remote island in terms of what people around you think about you or how they treat you. And if your survival instinct is not strong, I'm very concerned about what will happen to our students. That's a big concern. So if you would ask me to train people against anti-Semitism, I will try to understand what was anti-Semitism in different parts of the world. Why in Russia it was one thing, why in Germany it was a different thing, why in Arab countries it had a different idea. So you have the religious anti-Semitism, you have the national anti-Semitism, you have all kinds of anti-Semitism. They all have different titles and names. So they have to know about it. And more important than that, I would say, okay, why are we proud to be Jews? Despite all the hatred and the people around us who don't like us so much. And I will talk about the amazing fact, as I told you, that for 3,700 years, we managed to be a community. I talk a lot about it. I talk about our Hebrew name. You know, you are Avrum, like you are somehow descendant of a person that you know that you are his descendant, Avram Avinu. I'm Shlomo, like after King Solomon. And I talk to the boys and the girls, what's your Hebrew name? And you know that these Hebrew names existed like thousands of years ago. You are connected. You are connected. And they find even something as small as this one so profound. They feel that in moment they part of a very long chain through the history. We talk about the Jewish community, our strengths, tzedakah. I'll give you one example of anti-Semitism that existed in Europe. You know, they always talked about secret fund that every Jew that is going through financial stress is the rich people who control the world, of course, they are going to find a way to give him money and to build a business. You wouldn't believe, by the way, how many people until this very moment think like this. I just look for this person who is going to help me to build a business. But let's forget about this one. But the reason was very, very simple. You go even today to Rome. You know, in Rome, on the streets of Rome, you are going to see people drunk, look terrible, dirty, filthy, really terrible. I think you don't have to go to Italy. There are some places in the United States, Baruch Hashem, not in Canada yet, that you see people in the bottom of the social structure. And they look awful and no one cares really about them. It never existed in the Jewish community. If a person broke, if a person had all kinds of issues, the community immediately helped him to keep his dignity, to make sure that his children have food on the table, that a certain level of tzedakah is always kept. And this by itself is a reason, unfortunately, for anti-Semitism, because the Jews are different, but they don't understand they are different in the ability of every person to care about the other one. And this is something that, unfortunately, in the general community does not exist as in the Jewish community. So they see us as separate. Again, my best advice to counter anti-Semitism is just to show them how much they could learn from Jewish life and to adapt it to unprivileged communities. They could change the course of their life if they would just try to learn what are the secrets of Jewish survival. And unfortunately, instead of learning, they turn it against us. And this is very...
Well, would you teach Torah to the non-Jew?
Absolutely, yes. I know that the halacha say that, you cannot teach, but I think that certain things we must teach, actually.
Like what?
The non-Jews. I'm sorry?
Like what?
Yeah, it's the stories of the Bible. I have to say, listen, they learn it too. But with the message, the real message of the complexity of the human being and what God wants us as a good society. Not everyone has to be Jew, but according to us, everyone has to keep the 7 mitzvot of Bnei Noach, which by themselves are making a wonderful community. We have to be on a higher level, but really what God wants is a perfect world that treat everyone nicely and with respect and dignity and his rights. And I would see no problem to, of course, in a halachic way. We don't try to convert the world to Judaism. That's not the purpose here. But to teach them why are we unique, what gave such a strength to the Jewish communities over the centuries, I think it will be wonderful if we develop actually curriculum for this.
Rabbi, about 4.5 years ago now, I started to learn Gemara, Talmud, and I did within what's called the Daf Yomi cycle. And essentially that was started in 1928, and it was predicated on the idea that if people learn one page back and front for about 7.5 years, that they can complete all the tractates of the Talmud. Since I started learning, I must tell you, as you said before, I've become much prouder as a Jew. I think that I have a much better basis of understanding for Torah, although very, very little, than I did prior to starting Daf Yomi. And what I found within the Talmud, within the Gemara, they're synonymous, is the strength of logic. It is the strength of storytelling, agadata, and the back and forth, as we are known for, the Jewish people, right? Elu v'elu, this is right, and this is right, and this is right, all within a given context. Sometimes, Rabbi, I'm learning Talmud, and I start to laugh. Because I start to laugh literally out loud. I go, oh my gosh, what a shita, what a position this rabbi is taking. This is so bizarre. It's so out there, but I understand why he is doing it to make his point dramatic. Then, as preparation for this interview, I started to read up on Shai Agnon, who is considered to be one of the finest literary giants of the Jewish world, but not only the Jewish world, the world in general.
Go. There.
Stop me there, Rabbi. Stop me there.
Shai Agnon, I consider him to be apparently not the greatest Jewish writer of all times, but I would put him in the first 5 great writers in the same level of
Shakespeare?
With no question, I think he's better, by the way. Honestly, I'm completely biased with Shai Agnon. I have to say that. But I think that everyone who is able to read Shai Agnon in Hebrew will have to join with me that he was the giant of all.
Okay,
Even
Rabbi,
Shakespeare. And I know
let,
Shakespeare a little bit.
let me break in for a second.
Sure. No, I
That's
don't
our
like when people say one of the greater Jewish writer. No, he was one of the
Okay.
greatest writer ever.
Okay. So my question to you is as follows. You are a passionate lover of Gemara, of Talmud, right? I know we've talked about it. There have been articles written about you, and you say that it is one of the fundamental things that we need to learn and to teach our children. The complexity of it helps us grow as a people. It's probably one of the survival things that, I remember reading in Rabbi Steinsaltz's book, The Essence of Talmud. He says in communities where Talmud no longer existed, where it was not taught anymore, that community dissipated. That community went away. So my question to you is, Agnon, from what I can see, the reason why people love Agnon so much is because he's the extension of the Talmud. That Jeffrey Sachs, who edited stories by Agnon, he said if you read Agnon and you think that you're reading about a Hasidic shtetl somewhere, then you're not reading him correctly. You have this depth of
100%
Agnon,
agree.
that you have the depth of the Talmud. Is it safe to say that you're attracted to both of those pretty much for the same reasons?
That's a wonderful analysis, Avrum. I have to commend you for this one. And I want maybe to build a little bit upon what Jeffrey Sachs, now is a doctor, and his contribution to the world of Agnon is just beyond any expectations. Like known in many, many circles, like people don't hear about him, they don't read him, and Jeffrey Sachs brought it back to life. Now, yeah, fantastic. Okay. What is a Gemara? And here is the point, because I'm sure that when you were not seven, but 9, 10 years old, you started maybe to open a Gemara, especially with your background. But you are excited about the Gemara when you are already an adult person with experience. What happened in between? So here is the point. You cannot excite children, even 12 or 14, about questions of a goat that jumped off the roof and broke some kelim. Now, it just like a goat, he doesn't know what is a goat. He's like, what kelim, what damages, what are you talking about? It's so removed from his world. And nevertheless, a talented teacher will take it a completely different avenues, and he will start to ask the students things that they really care about. And I'll give you one example. If we still have some time.
We have time, Rabbi.
Part of my job is to go to evaluate teachers and to talk to them how they can improve their classes. So I went to a biology class, and I hear the teacher talk about the blood circulation in the body. And like after 5 minutes, he lost them all. They don't care anymore about blood and circulation and so on. So I told the teacher, can I just ask the students one question? And I asked them, who was injured recently? And like half the class jumping, me, I cut my finger, I cut my leg, and yeah, what happened? Like the blood gush out. And I asked them, why? Why the blood gushed out? And at this point, I said to the teacher, you now explain them. And he said to me, like, what happened here? Like I lost them. And I said, because the blood circulation does not touch their personal, they don't care about it. But when you talk about something that they care about, they listen.
Very good.
And this is very true also about Talmud. If you teach about like one ox goring the other one, that's not interesting. But if you teach about responsibility of a person to guard his property, when you talk about how careful you have to be towards your neighbor, another person, and so on, you frame it in a very different way that really interests the student, because issues of someone broke something of them and a debate, should he pay for it or he shouldn't, it's your fault, it's my fault. This is part of their world. And what is a Talmud? Part of the world. So once you have the teacher who managed to bring the laws into a story, into something that touched their heart and mind, the picture is very, very different. Agnon, I don't think it's extension of the Talmud, but I'll tell you why Agnon is so important for me and why I think every Jew should read Agnon. Listen, our life are complicated. Let's be honest. On one hand, Agnon grew up in a cheder. He was a huge Talmid Chacham. He knew the entire Torah. But at the same time, he saw the modern world and was confused. He went through the First World War. He went through the Second World War. Can you really grow as a Jew if you don't ask yourself question, what happened in the Holocaust to the Jewish people? What happened to the world in the First World War? How Cain again can kill Abel, and the world continue to go on? There are so many questions that to be a real Jew, I'm not talking about the people who imitate their parents, but a real Jew cannot be and cannot grow if he does not ask this hard question. And Agnon, I'm not saying answer the question, but he called you to think from different angles. That's what makes him such a great writer. He brings to the surface the big question of Jewish existence, try to explain it, try to give you some reflection on it. You can agree, you can disagree, you can hate it sometimes, you can love it sometimes, but it inspires you to think about your existence as a Jew. That's why I love it. So in this regard, Agnon does not tell the story of a shtetl. He tells the story of the Jewish DNA. And if you really understand it, if you put the Jewish existence under the microscope, Agnon gives you such a good microscope to see the beauty, sometimes the not so beauty sides of Jewish existence. And to me, it's very, very inspiring. And that's why people love Agnon. We have here the Chug Agnon. I don't want to be a salesperson, but this is such a wonderful Chug that exists for dozens of years. People are coming and we deal with this very question, the Jewish existence, why people are hating us, what can we do about it, what is the status of Medinat Israel in the entire fabric that we call Jewish history. And Agnon raised many, many questions, give very profound answers. That's why I love Agnon.
I'm going to read you two pieces right now, and I want you to tell me if there's a correlation between the two. The first piece that I'm going to read you is from Midrash Tanchuma in Naso, the tractate Naso, and it's a short piece of Agarata. It's a very short story. It's very shocking. And then I'm going to read you a few lines from a story that I just read in preparation for our interview today called Forevermore. You're familiar with the story?
Who wrote it?
So it's Agnon. It's called Forevermore, and it's with...
I have to tell you, I have difficulty with the translation of Agnon to English. So you will read it to me. I hope I will recognize it.
I think it's Ad HaOlam, forever, or something like that. Anyways, it's a fascinating story. But let me just tell you the Agarata first. You can comment on it by yourself or together with the Agnon piece. A story is told of two sisters who resembled one another. One sister was married and lived in one city, and the other sister was married and lived in another city. The husband of one of them grew jealous of his wife, and he wanted to bring her to Jerusalem to drink the bitter waters. And remember, this is in the Talmud.
Yeah.
That sister went to the city where her sister lived with her husband, and her sister said to her, "Why did you see fit to come here?" She said to her, "My husband wants me to drink the bitter waters." Her sister said, "I will go in your stead and drink." She said to her, "Go." She dressed herself in her sister's clothes and went in her stead. She drank the bitter waters and was found to be innocent. She returned to the home of her sisters, who came out happily to greet her. She embraced her sister and she kissed her on the lips. When they kissed one another, her sister breathed in the smell of the bitter waters, and immediately she died. You familiar with that, Agadata?
Of course, yeah.
What's your reaction to that story?
It's Yalkut Shimoni. Well, as I always say, the stories of the Talmud, many of them never happened.
Yeah.
The purpose of the story is a very profound message into a Jewish thought. So I'm not saying that this story never happened, but if it happened or not, it does not make any difference to me. I have to admit, this point. How do you understand the main point of the story here?
I think one of the things I take out of it is the love between sisters, the love
That's a
between
very good
siblings.
take.
Because my sister passed away, Naomi Hecht, 2-3 years already.
Yes.
And I see what it's like. Rabbi Shaim told me, he said some of the most difficult funerals that he's gone to is funerals of siblings, because they're with us all of our lives. She was willing to risk her life. She knew that she wouldn't die because she did not, was not with another man. But the other thing too, it's shocking, and I've read this to other people, Rabbi. They found the end of it so shocking that, in fact, she had slept with somebody else, and therefore, when she drank the bitter waters from the lips of her sister, she died. And I think that the idea that she drank it through her sister's lips, through love, is really such a powerful piece.
And I agree with you. I think, to me, this story, again, I did not have enough time to prepare myself to analyze the story, but I'll tell you what I think is the idea behind the story. What our sages, when they wrote this story, what they wanted to emphasize, I believe. Listen, we do many, many things in Jewish life, which seems to be like ceremonies. The whole story of sota and drinking the water is kind of a ritual. It's a ceremony you take to the Beit HaMikdash and so on and so on. And sometimes Jewish life is centered around the rituals and around the ceremonies. And we forget a little bit like the meaning, profound meaning of the ritual. What are we really doing here? Netilat Yadayim is more than Netilat Yadayim. It's like preparing the body to something holy, because for us, Shabbat meal is something holy, and you have to elevate yourself, Netilat Yadayim, in order to do it.
That's washing your hands, right?
Exactly. Like, it prepares you to a certain mental state that elevate you from the ordinary to something more holy. I think that the story of Mei Sota, you might think, okay, the Torah here has like an ancient polygraph to see if a person is saying the truth or not. And it's one way to look at it, because it looks like the Torah has a trick to realize if she slept with another person or not. But I think our sages were opposing to this idea, that it's just like a ritual and you can somehow trick the ritual because it's a Jewish mind. Like, why should I go? My sister will go and she will do it, and you outsmart the system. And I think this midrash, this story comes to say, you don't understand. It's not about the ritual. There is something profound. And if a woman slept with another one, God knows it very well. Now, normally the ritual comes to find out. But if you think that you managed to trick the ritual and to outsmart it, I have great news for you. God is there, and in a very ironic way, set justice in the right place.
Very good. I like that.
So that's the way I read it.
But Rabbi, just to go off for a second here, you believe in God, obviously.
Of course.
With all your heart and mind, you do know there's a God?
100%.
You don't question it at all.
You know what? Listen, I have to tell you what I tell to my students. And listen, this is very, very important. Do you know this? There is a new art where when you look at the picture, you see nothing. And then when you put your eyes in a certain position,
You squint.
you see inside all kind of things that you don't see the first place, right?
Yes.
Do you know this art? I can't remember. It's 3D illusion. I can't remember the name of it. But you can see it in many museums, and some artists are doing amazing things with it. And I tell my students, you see this? No, you don't see anything. But if you train your eyes, you start see it. People want to see God right away. And they don't see anything, they say, no God. I can say about myself that many times I feel that I trained my eyes to see God in places where other people don't see them. And again, I don't want to brag, Chas v'chalila, because, what I would say, I try to believe in God. I try to find God in everything that I'm doing every day, and the help that He sent me or the warning that He sent me. Listen, I don't think that a person can say, I'm such a righteous person, I always only in the shadow of God. I'm not. But I try my best. And I find that if we are tuned well, we will see God in our everyday life. And you asked, this is maybe a good way to tie together what we started to speak about, this moment that my grandfather decided to leave his daughter behind.
Yes.
Of course, you can say, it just happened. And I can understand the person who will say that. I see here an involvement of God in the decision that a person is doing. So as I said, realizing God in our life, you have to be a little bit trained and to try to see God. And He will show Himself to you if you just try to do it right.
Okay. I want to go to the next piece here, which is reading a piece from Agnon. The story is called Forevermore. I think it's called in Hebrew Ad Ha'olam. How would you say?
Yeah, it's a very famous modern story of Agnon, by the way.
Yeah, and it's a lead story in this book, which is edited by Jeffrey Sachs. I don't know if you can see that. And I read it, and it's a fascinating story. I just want to read a couple paragraphs, and I want to hear your response to the form of it and maybe some of the content. For 20 years, Adiel Amza, I notice with Agnon, he uses alliterations a lot for his names, right? Worked on his history of the great city of Gumlitata,
Gomlideta.
which never existed, right?
Yeah.
The pride of mighty nations until it was reduced to dust and ashes by the Gothic hordes and its peoples enslaved. After he had gathered all his research together, examined and tested them, sorted, edited, and arranged them, he decided that his work was finally ready for publication, and he sat down and wrote the book he had planned for so many years. He took the book and made rounds of the publishers, but without success. He looked about for patrons and benefactors, but he had no luck. During all the years he had been occupied with his research, he had not taken the trouble to integrate himself with the learned men of the universities, not with their wives and not with their daughters. And now, when he came to them seeking a favor, their eyes shone with such cold anger that their glasses seemed to warp. "Who are you, sir?" they said. "We've never seen you before." So I'm going to stop here, but it's a wonderful story. And you know what I was thinking? How true it is what he was saying. That here in the Jewish community, you have to know the players. You have to interact with them. If you don't, you can only get so far in terms of what your goals are. What do you think about what Agnon wrote there?
Listen, this is one of the hardest stories of Agnon. I'll give you one example. And here is why I say that it's very, very hard to translate Agnon. Because, for example, you are going to see that Adiel Amza, the person that starts with Ein and Ein, right? And then you talk about Gumaldeta. And I think that Agnon, in his book, if I'm not mistaken, he describes the city Ir Gdola, Ir, which is start in Hebrew in the Ot Ain again, Gdola, Gimel, which is like Ge'a, like proud of itself.
A proud city.
Yeah, so the entire story is about people that start with Ain and Gimel. You are going to see that, and you might find it very interesting that Agnon is also Ain Gimel, Agnon, right? So And just to
Oh yeah,
explain this
right,
idea of
right.
Ein and Gimel in Agnon, in Hebrew, Ag, like Uga, is something which is round. And Agnon see himself, again, as I said before, the discoverer of the Jewish DNA, because it's always the same. Like our Jewish history is not going at the linear line, but more like a spiral line that is like round and round and round. So, uh, what exactly Agnon meant, many people believe that Gumaldeta, and think about the two words, is Gamul and Dat. Gumaldeta, like it's like Dat, religion. It's a person that was, it's a city that was freed, unfettered from religious commitment. And that's how we saw, by the way, Rome or the Nazis. People were free from the religions of God, the main value that all society, all humanity has to behave like. Some people see it more like about the Jewish community. I don't know. I think that the story was published in 45 or 46, right after the Second World War. So maybe it's more universal than like just Jewish thing. But there is no question that Agnon criticized the structure of the Jewish villages, social structure before the Holocaust. Uh, this is not a lesson about Agnon, but Agnon in his stories saw what is coming. And part of it was obviously, not part. The main part came from obviously the anti-Semites and the Nazis and the other collaborated with the Nazis. But Agnon, like our sages in the second temple, saw the problem in the Jewish community is also responsible to some of what happened. Now, I don't want to release any blame from the people who killed us. I don't want to victimize Chas v'Chalila, my grandparents and them. But there were problems with the Jewish community, and you raised one of them, that sometimes the mobility in the Jewish community might be hard if you are not connected to the right people. Agnon talk about this problem. That's why I'm so intrigued to Agnon, because he sees the big picture and is very honest to tell you, we had our issues. These issues still exist and we have to deal with them and we have to solve them if we want to ensure better future to our children and grandchildren. And your interpretation is good as mine. That's the beauty of good literature, because everyone read it the way he experienced his own life. And the moment he published it to the public, it's not the author anymore. It's our book.
Rabbi, you're talking about how letters are used very often in the Torah, or you see in our prayers, Eshet Chayil, Aleph Bet Gimel Dalet. I want to read you something. We're going to wrap up the interview. We're going to bring this circle full. So I want to state this, and then I have one more question to ask you. Rav Chaim Lowy, who was the brother of the famed Maharal of Prague, explained that Talmud study is a form of spiritual protection. This is alluded to by the word Gemara, like your name, which is an
Gabriel,
act. This is alluded to by the word Gemara, which is an acronym for the four hosts of angels, each one headed by the archangels who sing God's praises and surround the person to save him from harm. Gimel, Gavriel, Michael is the Mem, Raphael is the Resh, and Uriel is the Aleph. And when you take them all, it spells the word Gemara. Did you ever heard such a thing? It's very interesting.
I heard this one. I can tell you another one.
Yeah, tell me another
Okay.
one.
Oh, ask me your question. I will answer your question with a funny story. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, we used to have our best talk conversations after davening when we come out of shul at Mincha Marv on Friday night. I have to start going back to shul so I can have some of those talks with you. And I remember when we were schmoozing, Rome came up and your fascination with ancient Rome. And you said you wanted to know more about it. So you went to Italy and you became a Roman tour guide. Now, I must tell you, when I thought about bringing you on the show, when I think about you as a friend and as a person, I'm really fascinated by those twists and turns in your life. Not too many people would be so interested in Rome that they would become a tour guide. So tell me about that.
Okay. The truth is, I didn't go to Rome to become like a tour guide. I actually went with my wife to Rome, and we fell in love with Rome.
Right.
And I'll
Right.
tell you why in a second. And then when COVID hit and we wanted to go again to Rome, we couldn't because, as you remember, like no flights were from Toronto to Rome and elsewhere. I decided that I don't give up my love to Rome, and I took a course with the University of London of being a tour guide in Imperial Rome, which I was more interested. So, I'm not sure that I know about all the new buildings in Rome, but I can take you to a very interesting visit on the Palatine Hill, on the fields outside Rome, the pyramid, the catacombs of Rome. Very, very interesting. And after 16 weeks, I got a license to be a tour guide in Rome. Unfortunately, I cannot be a tour guide, a real tour guide, because the Italians are not stupid. They don't let other people with different nationality to be a tour guide in their country.
But they'll teach the course.
So I can lead myself, and you know what? It's really interesting. It's more for myself. Not only that, actually, a few months ago, because the catacombs and the gravestones in Rome are so important to understand what happened, I took 101 Latin also. I passed it with reasonable mark, like 74 or something like this. But I wanted, because Latin is a very difficult language, let me tell you, I didn't know that it's that difficult language. And and I'll tell you what I think.
Yes.
Why Rome fascinating me? Because I do believe with all my heart that only Jews understand what Rome stood for. And I'll explain you what I mean. The first time we went with a professor from university in our first trip, she was a very lovely lady, and she explained about Rome, and we go to the Titus Arch and to the Colosseum and to the Palatine Hill, and it was very interesting. And then it hit me something very interesting. I said, for you, it's all history, but for me, it's life. I said, you see, I'm not shaved. It was in the time between Yud Zayin B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, where Orthodox Jews don't shave, and, they are mourning the Churban. And I said, for me, Titus, name like Titus, Vespasian, Hadrian, for me, these are people that has connection to my current situation. For me, it's not history. And she looked at me in the beginning in a complete amazement, like she didn't understand what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And
Yes.
as I explained it to her, after like 2 hours tour, you know what she told me? I think I'm going to buy a ticket and to go and visit Israel.
That's what she said.
Because it was the first time that she understood that what Rome did to the world is much more than just architecture and bridges and amazing buildings. There is something in the culture that we Jews opposed, and only the people who opposed it understand what Rome actually represents. And therefore, every time that I go or read, and I read quite a lot about Rome, it comes to me clearer and clearer. I am a descendant of a person who fought against the Roman culture. What? And listen, I'm today alive. I know the connection to my ancestors. These guys have no idea. Let me tell you one story, which is amazing and very inspiring. To become a Roman, you have to know 7 generations of your ancestors who lived in Rome. There is one family, I think the Rossini family in Rome, that they relate themselves to Julius Caesar. There are 17 families in Rome from the Jewish community who know that they came as slaves. They were freed later from Jerusalem. They carry the names. These people are like the descendants of the people who arrived from Jerusalem. They are the real Romans. So you go to Rome, You have one Roman family, and you have 17 Jewish Roman real families.
Mhm.
I found it so inspiring and amazing. And that's why I really love to tell people about Rome and everything that the Roman did, but the Jews knew to take the beautiful thing that Rome brought to the world, but to reject completely some of their ideas and way of life.
Rabbi, what I'm taking away from what you're saying is there's a whole lot to unpack. But what essentially you're saying is that we have a living history. We have a breathing history. It's not essentially studying histrionics, right? Well, knowing the dates and
Absolutely.
knowing the time and knowing the characters. Now, I want you to know that you're mechaving to Agnon, and I'm going to read something to Agnon from Agnon to you. He said, as a result of the historic catastrophe in which Titus of Rome destroyed Jerusalem and Israel, he said, I was exiled from the land. He says about himself, I was born into one of the cities of the exile, but always I regarded myself as one who was born in Jerusalem. This is what he said. And I want to continue. You have a few more minutes for me?
By the way, you should know this word that you are now quoting. He said when he got the Nobel Prize in Stockholm, in Sweden. This is the beginning of his lecture to all the people.
Yes.
And he speak about himself as the Levi who sing the song of Jerusalem to the Jewish people.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
you're jumping ahead. By the way, his 1966 speech for the Nobel Prize is in this book, so it behooves people to buy this book.
Okay, great.
Listen what Agnon said. Listen what he said. In a dream, in a vision of the night, I saw myself standing with my brother Levites, because he was a Levi, right?
Right.
In the holy temple, singing with them the songs of David, king of Israel, melodies such as no ear had heard since the day our city was destroyed and its people went into exile. I suspect that the angels in charge of the shrine of music, fearful lest I sing in wakefulness what I had sung in dream, made me forget by day what I had sung at night. For if my brethren, the sons of my people, were to hear, they would be unable to bear their grief over the happiness that they have lost. To console me for having prevented me from singing with my mouth, they enable me to compose songs in writing. Now, Rabbi, here's my question to you. It seems like Agnon felt that in some way his writing was prophetic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what do you mean by absolutely? Tell me about that.
Absolutely. Listen, again, Avrum, when you talk about Agnon, I can tell you so much, and I feel that the time is doing
It's limited, yeah.
justice to it. But I would say the following: Agnon, many times, saw himself as not. I would not say a prophet, but I would say like a continuation of King David, who wrote the beautiful Psalm of Tehillim and express the tie between living history, as you called it, and the connection and protection of God of the Jewish people. This beautiful piece that you read, and every time I hear it, I am just about to cry, because this is such a beautiful position that he takes. I continue 1800 years after the Levim are no more around us. I continue their job. He did see himself as a person who brings together the entire Jewish history to one place. And that's why he was very concerned about what Israel is going to be. We are in difficult days now in Israel. Is Israel a Jewish state? Is it just like a national state? How can we bridge it? He was very skeptical about it. This is a whole different story. We can talk about this one for hours and hours. But he saw himself absolutely as what he called himself, like the Sofer and the Chazan. He saw that he is writing the history of the past connected to the present and the future. And he was. Actually, everyone who read these stories and learn them will get such an insight into our past and our possible future with all the concern around it. And I think he lacked the prophecy of knowing what will happen, although I think he was a believer Jew and believed in the future of the Jewish people. But the prophets did not just prophesy about the future. They brought the word of God to the nation. And in this way, I think that's what Agnon tried to do. He wanted to bring the word of God to the Jewish people after the First and the Second World Wars, and also to give them some ideas, thoughts, questions, possible answers about how the Jewish existence will continue in Eretz Israel.
Tell me something. Do you write?
I wish.
Why don't you?
I don't feel that I really can add something to the. I don't feel that I can add something significant to the Jewish people. I could write, obviously, but let's take like people like Rabbi Sachs. He brought something unique, original, authentic. What am I going to bring? Just like repeating ideas that were said by much greater people. Like I feel very unworthy, honestly. I
Rabbi.
want to know who he is, and I don't feel that I can bring like something completely new to the world. And if Hashem gives me here and there like a good Dvar Torah, that's very nice, but it doesn't make me worthy of adding something to the sea of knowledge and greatness of Jewish culture.
Okay, I mean, I'm obviously going to have to disagree with you, because I think what you do in our interview and in our discussions together and all the many classes that you give, you're not simply pulling together ideas. What you're doing is you're pulling together in such a way that people can see patterns. And I think that's what life is all about. That's what Torah is all about. I mean, you're brilliant at it. So I'll have to argue with you, but I will tell you that when Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck and all the great guitarists who started out in the 60s, one night they went out to watch Jimi Hendrix play guitar. At the end of the evening, they went home, they put their guitars away, and they said, there's no reason for us to play guitar anymore. I understand that point of view. I do. I've heard it from other people. And I often think of that myself when I'm sitting down to write is, what do I have to add? But I will tell you, as a dear friend and someone who loves you, who feels very strongly about who you are, I think that you'd benefit the world an awful lot by writing something on Agnon and maybe comparing it to the Talmud. Who knows? Who knows? Anyways, I want to thank you so much. It was a lovely schmooze.
Avrum, thank you very, very much for your time. Again, I wonder why you brought me, and I hope that maybe we learned something new together today.
Absolutely. And I do want to tell all my viewers and listeners that the show today was dedicated to the soldiers of the IDF, but not only to them, to the mothers and the fathers and all the families who sit down and constantly worry about how their dear children are, how our brothers and sisters are in Israel. I'll tell you in short, I have a cousin who many years ago, her son was in the army, and it was during one of the wars. And it was Friday night, and a wind came in through a window, and it blew out her Shabbos candles. And she couldn't be consoled, Rabbi. She couldn't be consoled. She thought something, God forbid, had happened to her son. But it hadn't, thank God. But that is the road that our Israeli brothers and sisters are on. Like I always say, when we send our kids to university at 18, the Israeli mothers and fathers are sending their children to the IDF to fight for us. So God bless them. They should be well. And we have to thank them profusely from our hearts for not only fighting for Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, but for fighting for every single Jew everywhere. Right, Rabbi?
I completely agree with you. At this moment, I'll tell you a short story again. We have in chat a couple shlichim, the Meirman family.
Emissaries, messengers from Israel.
Yeah. And Shira, that's the female in the couple, she lost her brother about 3 weeks ago. He actually came to Toronto. He married a girl who actually was born in Toronto, and she made Aliyah, and she married this wonderful boy. I met him last Rosh Hashanah. This Rosh Hashanah, actually, he came to daven here. and he was killed with his friend about 3 weeks ago. Um, the parents, a very esteemed family in Israel, they are now in Toronto because Shira gave birth to a daughter. And to me, it's the most moving part of the Jewish existence. We can go from a state of devastation and destruction to give it a meaning in order to build a new generation stronger, closer to his nation, to the land, and to Hashem. And hopefully, this is just one story out of hundreds now, unfortunately. And Be'ezrat Hashem, hopefully, Hashem will give all the soldiers, all the people of Israel, and us the strengths and the powers to grow from it. And it always happened in Jewish history.
Yisrael Chai, the nation of Israel lives. Thank you so much for listening to the Avrum Rosensweig Show. It's a podcast with fascinating people who have very inspiring stories, and we look forward to being with you once again next week. Kol hakavod, Rabbi. Thank you so much for being with me, and to all of our listeners and viewers, take care.
Thank you.